This is Dave, and today's big hairy idea is standing your ground. In the last video, we talked about what happens when you have a choice between something you know is the right choice and the easy choice, and sometimes how it can be very tempting to take the easy choice, the shortcut, and that one of the techniques we can use to make the choice we really want to take, the one we know is really good for us, even though it's less attractive, is to amplify the magnitude of the decision, amplify the impact. We oftentimes belittle the impact. It's no big deal if we take the shortcut, but we make it a bigger deal in our minds, and that helps us to make the right choice. And I was thinking about that, about how tempting that easy shortcut choice can be. And an example came to mind, a story from my past, back from 1995, a little over 20 years ago, when I was an election judge in the city of Chicago. Now that may sound like a big deal, a big title. It's not a big deal. It meant that I was working at one of the voting stations across the city, and many people do this. I actually did it because I was a student in a program at the time, and they felt that elections in Chicago were just such a big thing in the city that they wanted all the students to be election judges for the day. So we were all assigned to different polling stations around the city, and most of the people who were working that day were people who just really don't work necessarily every day. A lot of people who are unemployed, a number of people who are actors, people who worked here and there, because you get like $100 for working the day. And most of the people were doing this every time there's an election. They'd sign up and they'd be these election judges, and they'd come in and work the day and then get their money and then go home. And they'd worked out a system to make the process really smooth and fast. Because at the end of the day, when the polls closed, there was a whole process of things we had to do before we could go home at the end of the day. And this one guy who was this out-of-work actor, that he kind of directed everyone. He's like, oh, I've got this really great method that'll get us out super fast at the end of the day. You see, all of these procedures we do at the end of the day after the polls close, we'll do them first before the polls open. So, we're supposed to seal all the envelopes with the ballots on them and sign our names over the seal so that it's clear that these ballots hadn't been tampered with. It's like, no problem. We'll just fold over the envelopes, sign on the line, and then when we finally stick it later on, we'll be really careful to fold it precisely so that our signatures line up, but we'll be really good, and it'll get us out much faster because we won't have to do all the verifications and all these really anal steps that we have to do at the end of the day, and we'll get out really fast. So basically, they wanted to take all of these safety precautions that made sure that nobody's tampering with the ballots and throw them out the window so that they could go home an hour earlier at the end of the night. And everybody's going along with this. Everyone says, wow, we can go an hour earlier. That's great. Sure. Where do I sign? And they'd put their names in. They'd fill out all the paperwork that they were supposed to do at the end of the night before we opened in the morning. And everyone was really excited that we'd be leaving early. And I didn't feel good about this. I'd been actually, trained by this group that was trying to enforce legal elections throughout the city. And here it was, everybody in my polling station was cheating on the safety precautions that help make sure that the city's elections are honest and legal. And Chicago has a whole reputation for people fixing elections, and that's why this whole organization existed in the first place. And here I was being asked to help basically fix this election, not to be falsifying any votes, but to be getting rid of the safety procedures that would make sure that nobody else did. And I was being asked to be doing this, and everybody else was counting on the fact that we as a whole group were going to be doing this so that we could all leave early. And it was a weird situation. I felt all this peer pressure to be saying yes. But really, I didn't feel good about that. I didn't feel good about being an election judge and helping them to cheat the system and make sure the election was not done right. The safety precautions were not in place. And it's very awkward and uncomfortable, but I went up to the guy in charge and I said, I'm sorry, I don't feel comfortable. I'm not going to sign before the elections close at the end of the night. I'm going to follow the rules. And I kind of braced myself for this backlash, for to be yelled at, for everyone to give me a hard time. And I was actually shocked at the reaction. The reaction was, whew, oh, that's great. We're so excited you're not going to sign. I was like, what? You were trying to get everyone to sign and now you're excited that I'm not going to sign? He says, yeah, well, we all do it because it helps us get out early, but we all know it's not so right and we're not so comfortable with it. But if you refuse to sign, then you can be like the judge for the entire place. You can be the one making sure that everything was done honestly. You can enforce it because we don't need 20 people to sign to make sure everything's honest. Really, if one person only signs after he's made sure that it's all done right, really then, the safety precautions are still in effect. So rather than throwing them out, okay, the 19 of us will cheat. You won't. You'll be the one who's protecting the entire system. And not only can you make sure that the whole thing is done honestly, but it makes the rest of us feel more comfortable with the fact that we're cheating, which was kind of a surprising response. And I'd already decided that I wasn't going to force them to all follow the procedures, that I was just going to stand up for myself, that I wasn't going to make them do it. And it was this really interesting reaction, and I didn't know how to take it. It's like, wow, they didn't give me crap for standing up for myself. They appreciated me for it. And in fact, they appreciated me not just for having the integrity for myself to say, well, no, this is what I was going to do. They actually felt better about themselves, knowing that there was somebody in their midst who was holding to a higher standard than they were. And so it was so hard for me to speak up because I was expecting just this wall of crap to start coming down on me and everybody to say, oh, you're ruining for everybody. And they didn't. They said, wow, we really appreciate that stance. And actually, we feel more comfortable with our easy shortcut choices because we know there's somebody who is holding to that higher standard. And so it was an important lesson for me that the reaction I was expecting to get by not taking the shortcut and standing up for the higher ideal, the reaction I was expecting was completely different than the one I was getting. I was expecting a horrible reaction, which is why I was feeling pressured to take the shortcut. But instead, I got a very empowering reaction that made me feel much better about myself and better about the entire process. And so it's important to know that what we expect is going to happen when we take the harder choice is often not what is going to happen. Sometimes the results will absolutely shock us and surprise us, and we'll see that the rewards are so much greater than we ever expected. So don't assume that you ever know what the outcome is going to be of your choices. And as much as possible, find that strength in yourself to take the choice that you know you ought to make.